Hi guys, bienvenidos to Todo, Vida podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again. On today's topic, we are going to be talking about burnouts. Now, I have so much to say regarding this topic. Each episode, while organization is good to have, I don't necessarily plan them out because it comes from the heart. I don't feel like you can plan anything that comes from the heart. So because I have so much to say regarding burnouts and kind of just what leads to them, what factors play into just causing a burnout and how to mend the burnout, I just wanted to go ahead and start off with this verse. It is Matthew 11:28. It's a verse that I have tattooed on my arm. It's also the same Bible verse that's on my grandmother's tombstone. So it says, Venid a mí todo lo que estás trabajados y cargados, y yo los haré descansar. So for those of you that don't speak Spanish, it says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So I feel like a lot of the times when we have burnouts, and again, I'm just speaking from personal experiences, but I feel like a lot of the times that we have burnouts can be caused because of multiple different things. For me specifically, I don't have a backup plan, so I felt the need to always have to go. And also too, I think that it's important to understand that when you come from first generation families, a lot of times your self-worth or your self-value is based off of your productivity level. And while it is important to be productive, I think that rest is just as important, because if not, we essentially don't have the energy to keep going, especially when you don't have a backup plan. There's nobody that you can call. There's nobody that you can sit there and rely on. So you kind of just have to get things done yourself. But another factor that may tie into burnouts is that sometimes we overdo or overextend ourselves for other people. And that leads us to eventually only realizing that we overextend ourselves once we've come to the point of being burnt out. And when you are at that point, it never looks good. You're agitated, you're overwhelmed, you're overstimulated. And I think that it's just important for us to know how to recognize and self-reflect on the things that do cause us to get burnt out. So going back to the first thing that I mentioned is that a lot of times we reflect our self-value off of our productivity level. If we're not doing enough, then, what are we really doing? If we're not doing enough, then just what are we doing with our lives? And we have to be realistic sometimes with ourselves. How much are we able to do in the matter of a day? Sometimes we want to be able to tackle everything that we literally end up not getting anything done. And we have to put ourselves at the center of everything. And I don't think that that's considered being self-centered. I think that ultimately you have to pour into your cup because nobody else is going to, pour into your cup. And I think a lot of the times too, we're impatient. We want to get so many things done that, back to the Bible verse that I just went ahead and I stated, we don't tend to trust God in a lot of situations. So we want to do so much that it's sometimes out of reach, it's out of our hands, and we take on way too much to the point that we're then burnt out. So my key understanding that I can try to go ahead and give you guys is just to trust God on that. The more you try to take onto your plate, the more he's going to show you that his timing is perfect. It's not at the timing that you want things to get done. It's ultimately at his timing. So just be patient with that. A lot of times we burn ourselves out because just simply we're not patient and we're not trusting God's timing, and his timing is going to be perfect. If you ever feel that you're in a rush for things, I promise you that is the enemy. You will eventually get to see that God always makes enough. He always provides enough, and he always allows it to be at perfect timing. So don't be so focused on trying to get things done on your timing, because essentially you're not really having faith. And I know it's good to want to get everything done because we feel as though we might miss our mark, or we feel as though we need to get everything done. But going back to what I just stated, God's timing is perfect. So don't overwhelm yourself. I've done that a lot in the past, and I have so much to say about this topic because I've experienced it. I currently do experience it. I even experienced it this week, and every single time that I tend to feel burnt out or I overwhelm myself, I always end up seeing how he makes it enough. So going back to that, even if your faith is the size of a mustard seed, just trust in him. I promise you I know we want to take things into our own hands sometimes, but that's not the way that it has to be. It's the way that we think that it has to be, but it's not. Another thing too, I think that when you don't have a backup plan, when you have nobody to fall on, you tend to want to take everything on and you want to put everything on your plate. But you have to be realistic with yourself. How much can you take on? And if you have people in your corner or in your circle that you can ask for help, don't ever be shy to ask for help. Those who I feel are connected with you, or like how they say, like, God sends you your people, like if they're part of your tribe, they will eventually catch on to it, or maybe they might not. And that's where you have to be willing to go ahead and ask for help. It's never a bad thing. And eventually you'll be able to see too who's really in your corner. Now, nobody is obligated to do anything for us, but I mean, I think that eventually you'll get to see who's really your people, and they'll do it without any interest. They'll do it without any reason to get anything in return. They'll just be able to help. Now, if you feel like you really have nobody to be able to turn to, then again, it goes back to what I had just stated. Keep your faith, even if it's the size of a mustard seed. Go ahead and keep that faith that God does have you. Another thing that I've noticed is I tend to, and I'm speaking based off of my own experience, I tend to sometimes put way too much on my plate for others, because I notice that it tends to heal the part in me that always wanted somebody else to be able to help me out or give me the helping hand that I needed. And I do for others as I would want done for me, because I hope that if I ever need it, that they'll be there. But not to burst anybody's bubble, sometimes that's just not the case, you know? And if we're doing for others what essentially they wouldn't do for us, then it's just important to realize that you don't have to get upset about it. You don't have to have any ill feelings towards them, but you do have to be able to recognize it to avoid you getting to the point where you overwhelm yourself once again, and then you end up crashing and burning. Because once you get to that point, it's you have to be able to sit with yourself and really see like what fills your cup. You know, it doesn't always have to be spending time with people or going out or, you know, being with family. Yes, while that is important to fill into your cup too, sometimes it's good to just be able to rest, take a day off. You know, when I first started my business, and the reason why I resort back to speaking about my business is because it's been a huge test of my faith. I think entrepreneurship in general is a huge test of faith. You're able to see God work through you, around you. And I think that when you keep God at the center of your business, you're just able to see it unravel naturally, you know? So like when I first started my business, I would tend to overwhelm myself with work. I would overpack my schedule because going back to, you know, I wanted to go ahead and take on as much as I could because I don't have anybody to fall back on. You know, once you start to make certain numbers, you have to eventually like stay to making those numbers, because if not, like who's going to be there, right? So point is that I would overwhelm myself with work. I would take 9-10 clients a day, no gap, not even like a meal break. And it's like, even people at 9 to 5s get a 15-minute break, and entrepreneurs, literally, they will not do it. They'll pack their schedule out, and then you just end up overwhelming yourself and you could crash and burn. But it's essential to give yourself that rest. And when I first started my business, I didn't do that. I would overpack my schedule. I would take on as many clients as I needed to take, or so I thought I needed to take, because I figured, well, while I can get it now, might as well do it. Meaning like, if I can make this amount of money in a day, I'm going to do it. Because when I was younger, I didn't have that opportunity. So I felt like I had to do that, right? And then I started to get tired. I started to get resentful. I started to get overstimulated, overwhelmed. And then I had to sit down with myself and realize like, okay, hold on. This isn't my client's fault. This isn't anybody's fault but my own, because I keep packing on to my schedule and not trusting. And I felt like, well, I need to make these numbers, because if I don't have enough for X, Y, and Z, then who's going to get it for me? And I kid you not, God has a way of slowing us down and sitting us down on his own timing. And we may not realize it in the moment, but he ends up doing it. And when we come to sit down, then we realize why we needed that day of rest. Again, I'm going to give you guys another example through my business. So even with the amount of followings that I have, TikTok, Instagram, those platforms, even with the podcast, this week, I had huge gaps in my schedule. I'm talking like for the last 2 months, I've been fully booked every single week. And this week, I looked at my schedule on Monday. I went from having like 5 clients to 2. My numbers cannot survive off $200 a day, right? Tuesday came about. I had, I think maybe 1 or 2. Wednesday came 2. And this is coming from someone that has 8, 9 people every single day. So I started to get frustrated. I started to get upset. Like, I cannot afford to not make these numbers. I got to get things done. I got to get things paid for, X, Y, and Z, right? Okay. So Monday, I didn't have enough clients. Tuesday, I didn't have enough clients. Wednesday, so on and so forth, right? Thursday was going to be my day off. My Friday nights ended up canceling on me. I had some Saturdays open, right? So I was just looking at my schedule and I'm like, I am not used to this. Like, this is not the amount of money that I need to make in a week, right? Let me tell you how everything planned out. So Monday, I ended up needing the day off to pour into my home. Essentially, that energy that I have at home is essential to the energy that I can provide in my business. If my home is not intact, I cannot be a service provider. It's in the name. I'm a service provider. I provide a service to other people. And if I don't have my cup full, even in my home life, I cannot do my job as I should. So Monday, I ended up having my mornings all the way open. I had a few clients at night that allowed me to take care of everything that I needed at home. And that gave me so much peace that allowed me to recharge my battery. And you would think like, well, how is cleaning, you recharging your battery? Guys, I was able to get my energy at home situated and it brought me peace. Tuesday, literally, I ended up getting booked out from 9 to about 2 o'clock. That allowed me the perfect schedule to be able to come to work, make some money, go back home, beat traffic, and simply be able to cook dinner and get ready to come and shoot the podcast, because a lot of times I'm not getting home till when I'm fully booked like I like to be. I'm not getting home till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And who wants to eat dinner at 10? Wednesday, ended up getting fully booked. Thursday, I was able to take a day off. Awesome. I'm going to be able to spend time with my loved ones. Friday, remember how I told you guys how my clients started to cancel at night? I got hit up last minute. One of my friends, hey, would you like to go, to a Dodger game? My little brother's here visiting from Texas. That family time is important because outside of just being a service provider, outside of being a businesswoman, I also have family that I like to spend time with, right? And then Saturday, I ended up just getting booked out. I'm going to be resting on Sunday. So every single time that I take a look at my schedule, it's funny because I always talk to God and I'm like, okay, you're doing this for a reason. I know that you are. I might not understand it now, but I know that I will then. And then you kind of feel bad because you're like, I know my faith is the size of a mustard seed, but that mustard seed was feeling almost non-existent, and God has a funny way of showing you why he does certain things. And then after he shows you, you're kind of sitting there like, oh, all right, okay, I understand now. You kind of get a little bit embarrassed because you're like, okay, I talk about my faith being so strong, but when things don't go my way, I tend to panic. I think that we all tend to do that. And that's okay, because in the end, he ends up showing you and he ends up showing up and he shows you how he makes enough. He makes enough up to even the last dollar or whatever it is that you need, So it's a huge test of faith, having your own business. And why was that important? Why was this week so important for me? Because he knows my heart and he knows that I was getting burnt out. And you know what? This week was a huge eye opener for me too, that, I tend to do because I know that anybody out there listening right now could relate, that we tend to do for others as we would want done for ourselves. And then you feel overwhelmed and you're like, man, I didn't have to take that much on because I already am overwhelmed enough with my own plate. So just try to avoid doing that. I know that we do it with good intentions. If you can do it, awesome. But also realize that don't do for others what they would not do for you. So for example, if I can't call you to be like, hey, let me borrow $500, which no one is obligated to do that. But that just means that when it's vice versa, do not think that you are able to call me and say, hey, can I borrow $500, Ash? And not because money is an issue, not because I'm stingy with money, not because of any of those reasons, but because that's just getting too comfortable. Because then ultimately you'll see when you're burnt out and you don't have it, who can you call to do that? Or it doesn't have to be money. It could be, hey, can you, whatever it is, a favor, or can you come here? Can you drive me here? Can you do that? Granted, I'm not saying be stingy. I'm not saying be greedy. If you can do it, cool, do it. But if you catch yourself overextending yourself, like I said, do not do for others what they would not do for you. And then if someone gets upset over that, then they just never respected your boundaries to begin with, because ultimately you have to make sure that you're taken care of first, so that way you can have your cup full. Because if not, again, you're going to get burnt out. I've noticed myself doing that a lot lately. And every single time that I speak of a topic on an episode of the podcast, I always ask God to allow it to resonate with me, to put it in my heart. Even with this topic, I had so much to say, and I didn't really know how to go ahead and word it, but once I sit down in front of the camera, I just start speaking from the heart. And that's nothing that I can rehearse. That's nothing that I could practice. I'm also a student in life where I'm learning myself. I used to be the type, and I said that in the first episode, I used to be the all gas, no brakes type of person. And then I started to realize, like, hey, we are organic, meaning we get older, we age, we tend to get tired. There's only 24 hours in the day. And as much as we would like to have more hours in the day to do more, again, just trust God's timing, because maybe it wasn't meant to be done today. Maybe it was meant to be done tomorrow. Maybe that perfect timing, that moment that you're supposed to be in is not until the next day or whenever he has it planned out for you. So just be realistic with yourself, what you're able to do. Two, trust in him. He's going to always show you that his timing is perfect. And also two, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't stack on your plate more than you're able to, especially for other people. I know that we do it, again, like I said, with good intention, but ultimately burnouts are an ugly side of life to be on the other end of. Like, if you end up getting burnt out, everything around you just kind of crashes. And if you don't pour into your cup, or cups, better said, because you have your home life, you have your family, you have your business, or just, your work schedule, whatever it may be. If you don't pour into them evenly, or even just have a balance of things, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get burnt out. And I know that a lot of us can relate to that. I know that a lot of us are experiencing it. I always ask that the topics that I speak on, I hope that it resonates with the people that are listening, So if you're currently experiencing that, I truly hope that you find peace in your heart to trust God's timing. And I truly hope that you understand that it's going to be on his watch. Don't overstack your plate. Don't sit there and try to plan everything. Organization in life is good to have, but I think sometimes we tend to plan things with, of course, good intent that it's going to work out as needed. But if it doesn't end up working out as it should, then that just means that you have a greater purpose. You have greater plans. And if you just sit there and you trust in him, I promise he's going to show up every single time. You just have to be willing to be patient. That's something that he teaches us as well, is patience. Because when you tend to rush things, it doesn't get done the way that it should. Okay, so if you are rushing anything right now, just take a second, breathe, put your trust in him, and just realize that it's going to get done when it needs to. Burnouts are not pretty. I experienced them myself, and I'm always willing to be a student in life to learn. And as I learn, I love that I now have the podcast, because I'm able to speak on it on here. And I don't know everything. I don't know how to cure your exact burnout. If you're listening to this episode right now with the intent that I'm going to be able to tell you how to cure your burnout, no, everybody's cup is different. Everybody's cup needs to be filled differently. For me, it might be resting, spending time with family. For you, it might be going to get a massage, or telling that one person that keeps hitting you up for something, no, finally. I can't tell you what's going to work for you. I can only tell you my perspective on things and hope that you apply it in the form that works best for you. I definitely do think rest is a common a common resolution when it comes to burnouts. I think that we all need it. Don't think that your self-worth is based off of your productivity level, because while it's good to be productive, that ultimately isn't what makes you a good or a bad person. The same way that you go hard all week, take a day to rest. And if you feel like you're going way too hard and it doesn't allow you to take time for other things, example, me with my business, I used to work 6 days a week. And then the one day that I had for rest, I didn't even want to go ahead and do the things that I needed to do because I was so tired. So again, life isn't about having everything together. It's about having a balance of things. And if you can find your perfect balance and what works for you, then that's going to be what helps you out. Learn to say no too. That's most important too. With burnouts, we tend to take on way too much. You have to learn how to say no. And if anybody gets upset at the boundary that you set up for yourself, then they weren't meant to be in your corner to begin with, to be completely honest. So never take no, or you telling no to other people, or you telling other people no as it being a bad thing. Ultimately, you're setting up that boundary so that you can have some self-respect. And I don't think that that's bad at all. Learn to be able to love yourself in that form to where you're willing to not take on so much, because when you're burnt out, the only person that's left with that and picking up all the broken pieces, I don't want to say broken pieces, but picking up the version of you that's just extremely tired is you. And there's so many different factors to that. I stated them on this episode, but only you're going to ultimately know why it is that you're feeling the way that you're feeling. When you do get burnt out, you have to sit there and self-reflect. What are things that are in your control? What are things that are not in your control? And what are things that you took on not needing to, You have to have a balance of things. And I know that sometimes that can be a little bit repetitive, because I want you guys to be able to understand that there's no exact equation to the solution of things. In this case, today's topic is burnout. But in any predicament in life, there's no exact equation on how to resolve it. You have to start with 1, self-reflection, 2, taking accountability, and then applying it. Apply it into action so that way you can resolve whatever is going on. In this case, when I speak about burnouts, it's, of course, like any other topic that I speak on these episodes, it's something that's close to me, because when I got burnt out, I just got fed up with things. I was really, really irritated. I was kind of resentful too, because I realized that sometimes I put out my hand more than I receive it in return. But again, I talk about accountability on this podcast, and it starts with me. It starts with me saying no. It starts with me taking rest. And my biggest fear was always like not having enough, because with my business, with being financially independent and not having education, guys, like I've stated before, I don't even have a diploma to fall back on, I'm strictly off of me being a service provider, and that's what allows me to pay my bills. I wouldn't feel like I was deserving of rest, because I'm like, I got to get things done while I'm young. I want to be established in my 30s. And while that ambition is good to have, I also was forced to learn how to rest as well. And God had a way of sitting me down and allowing me to learn that, last year, like mainly all of 2022 and the beginning of 2023, I was a full-time business owner. And even though I was going to school part-time, it felt like I was going to school full-time. I did have to go to esthetician school to get my license. So in case you guys are wondering, because I said I don't have a diploma to fall back on, I did have to get my license for esthetician. And guys, I would literally work. So, keep count of this. I would have to work. You see, even me saying I have to, right? But I would work Tuesday to Sunday. Monday through Thursday, I would go to school. So I would work 8 to 4. I had an hour drive to West Covina from Redlands. And then I would go to school 5 to 8:30. And then I had an hour drive back home. So I was going to bed around 11 and then waking up around 7 o'clock, the latest. And I was doing that 6 days a week, to the point that I got to a point where like clients weren't coming. as much as I put my schedule out there, and I kid you not, there wasn't a time that I paid my rent late. There wasn't a time where I paid my car late. He always made it enough. But now looking back on that moment, because I didn't understand it at the time, honestly, I look back at my move to Redlands and I felt like it was the slowest that my business had ever been. But I felt like when I was just making a lot of money, when there was always money in the account, I felt like I wasn't able to see life for what it was. I wasn't able to absorb everything that was going on around me because I was just so focused on making money that when my clients stopped coming to a point, I was forced to sit down and realize and analyze my life and see what I needed to change, what I was neglecting, and also too realizing that like money wasn't the answer to everything. Like I couldn't throw money at everything because you can't throw money to be able to rest your body. You could throw money to, get your house clean, get your car clean, but to rest, I essentially had to do that. And I thought that by just throwing money at things that it would, fuel me because, the house was clean, my car was clean, but I still was not well rested. So that's what I mean by examples or situations where God forces you to sit down. Now, when I was going through that time, I was really, really worried. I was really, really worried. I felt like it was the slowest that my business had ever been, down to the point where I think it was exactly the month before I opened up my shop. That was the one day that I actually feared, like, am I gonna pay my rent late? Like, am I not gonna have enough? I kid you not, that same day, I got the exact amount that was needed to be able to pay everything on time. And that was truly the slowest my business had ever been. And then the next month I got my shop. And literally it was like an over flood, or like, I don't want to say overwhelming, but there was just this flood of clients that came to me, and I was able to afford the startup for my store. Now, during that time, I think that there's a time and place for you to take on certain responsibility, and that's not a bad thing. But at the time that I opened up my shop, it was needed. Now I've gone to a point where God has allowed me to see that it ends up being enough. I just have to learn the balance of life, because making money isn't everything. Pleasing other people isn't everything, because then it doesn't come back to you. And not that you do things with the intention for things to come back to you, but it teaches you, like I said, don't do for others what they would not do for you. And that's not a selfish thing. That's not a bad thing. It's just a boundary, and it's a level of respect that you have to have for yourself. So the more I talk about examples and situations that I've lived, I don't want to go off topic and what I'm talking about, but I just wanted to go ahead and show you guys how certain things that I've experienced in life, I truly feel like are a testimony. And I think that, like I stated in the beginning of this episode, entrepreneurship, starting up my own business, has been the biggest test of my faith. Entrepreneurship in general is just a leap of faith, but if I keep God at the center of it, He always shows me how it's enough. And I lean on Him for a lot of things, for understanding, for what should be put in my heart, down to these episodes. And the things that I've lived, to me, it was just lessons. They were just experiences that I had to go through. And I truly felt like going through them is what made me definitely the person that I am today. But when I speak on this podcast, I always ask God to give me a sign to keep going, what to talk about, and feel that I am reaching the correct audience. So when I do speak of my experiences, and then I end up getting a flood of messages or comments like, thank God I found this podcast. Thank you so much for encouraging me to do X, Y, and Z. I'm truly flattered, because I've always said, and this goes back to the first episode and my promise where I asked God, allow me to be the vessel. I promise you that with the blessings that you give me, I will go ahead and I will just be the vessel, and I'll be able to pour into other people. And if that comes with this podcast, then ultimately, I'm blessed enough to even be able to do this. Honestly, I truly thank you guys for tuning in and allowing me to have a platform to speak on my experiences. Now, it comes very, very natural. It's something that comes from the heart. And like I said, I don't rehearse this. I don't practice it. This is a one take, So if I stutter, if I'm repetitive or whatever, at least you guys know it's not only organic, but it's from the heart. There was so much that I wanted to convey about burnouts, because there's so many different factors that tie into causing a burnout. But ultimately, like I said, while I can't have the exact equation for you, just start off with self-reflection. Analyze the situation, self-reflect. Once you self-reflect, go ahead and put it into actions. What do you want to change? And pour into your cup. Life isn't about having everything perfect. Life is about having a balance of things. And while you encounter situations, pay attention to your faith, because God is not going to he's not going to speak to you through words. He's going to speak to you through situations or lessons, and nothing is ever a punishment. I promise you, even when it feels like a punishment, it's not a punishment. It's just a lesson that you have to go ahead and learn from. And if you're open-minded enough, and if you have your faith, even if it's the size, like I said, of a mustard seed, you're going to be able to learn from it, and you're not going to feel like it's a punishment. Now, sometimes we do have the consequences of our actions, but it's a lesson to teach you what not to do. He's not going to punish us just because, he's having a bad day, he wants to punish you. No, sometimes you might get a consequence of your action, but it's to teach you how to not do that action again, or certain situations that you just simply need to learn from, and you end up seeing it unravel. If life was just an uphill, right, for all of us, and we never went through trials and tribulations, what would we learn? We wouldn't learn anything. But when you go through those moments that sit you down, that open your eyes, that cause you to struggle, that cause you to dig deep within yourself to continue to keep going, those are your lessons. And this ties back into faith. This ties back into self-reflection and putting things into plan of action. Because when we tend to get burnt out, we get overwhelmed, or we start to, blame certain things or people, no. Ask yourself, why am I feeling like this? Now, I am not, and this is going to kind of shift in topic, but down to the same thing, because I don't want to feel like, anybody's left out. So also too, for like all the moms out there, I'm not a mom, and I can only imagine how same way I have my business and, all these things that I cannot clock out of, motherhood is definitely not a job that you can clock out of, But one thing that I can, guide you guys on, or even try to just counsel you guys on, is like, learn to pour into yourself. Don't be scared to take a break. It's not going to make you any less of a mom or anything like that, because I do talk about, having my business, and that's the one part of life that I have not got to experience yet. But I know somewhere out there listening, there is a mom that just feels like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so overstimulated, I don't have any help. Just see what's in your control. Don't be scared to ask for help. And if you don't have any help, then at least see where you take on more than sometimes needed. You don't have to be perfect. I'm not a mom. Motherhood is not meant to be perfect. I think it's definitely meant to be a learning lesson. And if you're already kind of telling yourself or questioning how good of a mom you are, you're already a great mom, because you're thinking about it. The only reason I shifted onto that topic, of burnouts, is because I can only imagine how much moms experience it as well. But I just didn't want you guys to feel left out. I know it's probably easier said than done, but if you're questioning if you're a good mom or not, I think that that's already the first step in you being a great mom, is questioning if you're doing a good job. 2, don't be scared to ask for help. God always sends you your people. And if you feel like you don't have anybody in your corner, then just take on what you can and disregard what's not in your control, and trust that his timing will be perfect. That's a job that you can never clock out of. And that's something that I'm sure you guys get burnt out from it often. But again, I just pray that you guys put your faith in him, and just with everything else, again, back to the Bible verse that I went ahead and I quoted, Matthew 11:28, all of those who are weary and tired, come to him and he will allow you rest. I'm not perfect. I'm not a living example. I'm not, honestly, even ultimately, I know that it's going to sound crazy to people, but I'm not anybody to look up to. I'm not like a perfect image or a perfect being of a person. I think that God has allowed me to live a lot of trials and tribulations. And from that, because I have faith, because I had no choice to have faith as well, because what else was I going to believe in? I had to go ahead and take every experience that I went through as a learning lesson, which is why now I speak on these topics, So I just wanted to be very transparent with that. I wanted to encourage everybody that's currently experiencing burnouts to feel like they're not alone. I've experienced them myself. And again, I don't have the exact equation that's going to work for you. But if you can sit there, self-reflect, analyze the situation, and put a plan of action of what's in your control and trust his timing, I definitely think that will give you a little bit more peace in your heart. And just know that life is a constant up and down battle. It's not going to always be uphill. Sometimes there are moments that are forced to sit you down, but hey, maybe that's a moment of you needing rest. Maybe that's a moment of you needing self-reflection so that you don't continue to put yourself in situations where you do burn yourself out, or you just simply overwhelm yourself and spread yourself way too thin, so that way you can, again, avoid the burnout. Life is not going to be perfect. We all have to experience those moments to be able to grow from them. But I hope that if there's just anything that I conveyed in this message of today's podcast, is just to trust in his timing. I know it's easier said than done. I definitely do understand that. And you may not understand now why it's happening, but you will eventually. We all do. You just have to have an open mind, an open heart, and faith ultimately, So I know that I touched on so many different points in today's episode regarding this topic, but those of you who resonate with certain parts of this episode, I hope you hold those close to your heart. I hope you know that even though I do have this platform, I am simply the vessel. That's all that I am. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm simply a vessel. And the way that I'm able to see or have this perspective on it is because he just puts it in my heart. I really don't have an explanation. Again, even coming into these episodes, I don't rehearse them. I don't practice them. I just speak from the heart. And I hope that you guys can take from this, I hope that the audience that's listening out there is those who need it. And just, again, thank you guys so much for your time. I truly, truly do appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Todo, Vida podcast. Don't be scared to reach out to your community. Even if it's the closest people to you or however, just reach out to somebody, because your burnout can sometimes be, the load can be lessened sometimes with the people that God sends you. And if you feel like you don't have anybody, just know that sometimes God does put you in a corner so that the only way that you have to look is up. So just learn from that. I hope that today's episode really, again, just resonated with the people that need it the most. And thank you guys so much for tuning into Todo, Vida podcast. Please make sure to follow the podcast on IG, on Spotify, Todo Vida Pod. If you guys haven't, you guys can either follow my business page, Self-Care by Ash LLC, or even my personal page, _Ashley Scarlett. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I can't wait to see what God puts in my heart for episode 14. And again, I hope you guys were able to take something from this episode. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day, night, wherever you're at, and blessings to all of you guys. Thank you.